Hey, can you talk, Michael? Oh my gosh, Michael, are you talking? Give me a thumbs up or something. I can't hear you. For Pete's sake. Hey, Dan. Sorry, I don't know why we're glitching so bad. I tried opening it. Give us a minute. So, Michael, you can hear me. What? Okay. So talk. Let me see if I hear you. Can anyone hear? Can anyone besides me hear Michael? Okay. He's having trouble connecting for some reason. So I thought hey puppy, I thought I'd open the space, and he suggested I open the space. But he's still having trouble. You want me to try? I know, it stinks, doesn't it? Anyway, hey Dan. So Michael, you want me to try again? Let's try again.
Yeah, I was just going to say I can't hear Michael either.
He's the one who's glitching for some reason then, because I can hear you just fine. Okay. Oh, there you are! Yay!
On desktop now. Before I was on mobile, like I never had any problems on mobile, and unbelievable.
I always run spaces off my phone.
Yeah.
Never run one off the desktop. I don't think
No, I wasn't running it off desktop. I was running it on my phone, and it was not giving me access to my mic in the app. It's insane.
I mean, I have like the desktop up, but the features do not go back and forth. It's not the same on the desktop as it is on the phone.
No.
It just doesn't work the same. In Spaces, I've never gotten Spaces to work. I've never gotten Spaces to work right on the desktop.
I have, but at the same time, like I feel like it gives X number of problems, but first time for the mobile giving problems. So yeah, we're in it.
It seems to want to play now. So
yeah, that's cool.
All right. Well, technically, this is sort of Michael's hosting space, but since we had problems, but if you wanna start us off, or if anyone has anything they want to share before we get rolling, I don't know.
Yeah. Let me dig up some stuff. I would have put these into the nest before, so.
Well, there's time like the present.
What's that?
I said there's no time like the present, right?
Yeah. Usually I try and do that stuff like in the first couple of minutes. I mean, I guess technically it is the first couple of minutes, but 12 minutes later. Yeah, up there, Link to Tartaria ebook, which came out last Monday. Talked a little bit about that. Obviously, Heidi wasn't here, so again, thank you for beta reading that one for me. And then...
You're welcome.
Hey, the system works. You'll be a beta listener before too long, next month probably. And then there's a link to... Oh, I actually put the wrong one up. Let me dig it up, because there was a recording. I downloaded the recording of the last workshop that we did and put it up as a podcast, which I feel like is good content, and trying to turn it into a series. So those are available up in the nest. Today we are asking, are you done yet? So this is a progress check-in, not only for Heidi and I, but for you as well. If you have work that you are trying to turn out, as we do, you get a chance to discuss those issues or problems or the successes. Obviously, I finished one step of one of the projects that I'm working on. Currently getting into the audiobook, did a little bit of editing of that voiceover on Sunday. Did not get very far, but did a little bit of it. And I have to punch in a couple of lines here and there, as is typical, when you start to actually go back and listen to an audiobook recording. Sometimes you find that there were incidental noises, or that you're just not happy with the read that you gave. And even if you did multiple versions of a line, maybe something just didn't work, or maybe the one that did work, there's like, you bumped the mic or something. Stuff happens. About to start doing layout for volume 3 of Exploring Our National Parks, that I worked on about a week and a half ago, a little bit. So just getting the last park chapter finalized and get it ready to read for the audiobook. And then there's a closing bookend chapter that I always do with that series. And that was kind of in rough shape. I had some leftover ideas from the opening chapter that just didn't really seat well there. So I used them in the end, kind of revisit some things I started with and flesh that out a little bit more. It's not done, but there are some other folks that are taking a look at that, and they had watched it kind of develop, and also had given me reading recommendations that are relevant to that project in the past. So I kind of lean on them as beta readers, developmental readers for that project, or at least this book of that project.
Sounds like you're keeping busy.
Yeah. What about you? What have you been doing? How's Tennessee?
Tennessee. You all don't know, my son's starting college. He just, so I'm 2,000 miles away from home, right? So I'm still here, and I had to extend my trip out. I'm kind of losing my mind because I've been living in a hotel for 2 weeks, drinking terrible coffee, which I posted earlier. So I'm literally kind of just losing my mind. So I'm not feeling too rational at the moment because I'm sitting in a hotel room, which is making me go stir crazy. But in terms of writing, mm-hmm. I'm sorry for my trauma dump. I'll try and stop. But in terms of writing, yeah, I actually have gotten a little bit of progress done in the midst of all of this sort of stuff I'm doing for him. And I need to write the last chapter of the second book of Songless. So, and I mean, I know everything it's going to do. I'm just trying to figure out how to. I've got two things that I'm trying to figure out for that. Maybe you guys, want to kind of workshop it a little bit, since that's kind of what we're doing. Is so for a book 2 in a series, it's going to kind of run like a trilogy. But I've been getting other ideas for sort of offshoot stories, or maybe like a second trilogy that would follow up after the first one, kind of grouping like that. But suffice to say, let's say this is a trilogy. This is book 2. So I'm trying to think about how to end that properly. I don't think book 2 always ends on much of a high note. It always kind of ends a little low. I don't know. Would you guys agree with that? Or
I would say that is kind of a typical approach to things. When you're in a trilogy, because you have some semblance of victory in your first part, and then you kind of lay the characters low at the end. Obviously, like the big one for that is The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, it's quite the gold standard, I think, and I think they do that to a certain extent in Lord of the Rings too, right? What do you think, Dan? I see you, Hunter. This is kind of your realm. If we're talking, I know you're more of a Star Trek guy, but
I would say that even that even kind of happens in the first segment too, or at least the movie. Though I think the books break apart what happens differently in terms of Boromir compared to the movies. But the movie, the movie kind of does that a little bit.
Well, he doesn't. Yeah, I mean, Boromir gets killed at the very beginning of book 2. He kept him alive. It was not to end too low, I think. Right. So, if I'm remembering correctly, the Fellowship of the Ring kind of ends with not Bilbo, Frodo.
Frodo.
Yeah. Sorry. Again, a hotel room, not good coffee. Frodo having this sort of vision in this chair of all the kings and all of this stuff, and kind of him moving on, and then and him going off with Sam, right? And they just sort of have that section, and then it opens. Then book 2 opens with Boromir's death and them running off. But it still worked in the film. But I don't know. Book 2. I think it needs to be a bit of a low note. I'm wondering. I mean, how many threads are acceptable to leave open if you know you're dealing with a trilogy? I mean, the first book, I think it pisses people off too much. And I closed up as much as possible. But when you go into book 2, you're leading into something more. I mean, and they left threads open. If we're using, say, The Empire Strikes Back as the sort of gold standard, I mean, you've got Han Solo. I remember seeing it when I was a kid. And I was just like, how could they do that? How could they leave him in court? What's happened to Han Solo? But I guess it worked. It's a bit of a cliffhanger. Is it more acceptable to have a bit going on in book 2?
Well, my mind totally went to Star Wars as well, like about again, like part 1 and part 2, or at least. I know they're episode 4 and episode 5, but like the first parts that are released. But also, I was thinking about like the Matrix movie. Like they did sort of the same thing. Like part 2 ended in a cliffhanger because like Mr. Smith was aboard the craft, and yeah, it was very much ended on the cliffhanger.
Oh, good call. I forget about those movies a lot.
So my thing with that is like, I thought the first Matrix movie was really great, but I thought the second one and the third one, they just kind of went downhill from there, personally. But so like when you're dealing with the middle, but I see your point. I mean, so you're dealing with an ending in a middle story, in a middle book of a trilogy. You want to end it. You can leave. You've already, people have got buy-in, I guess, right? If they've already read the first book, then they're reading the second book. They've got some buy-in, so they're willing to be a little more teased, I guess, should we say?
Yeah, I agree with you in regards to like quality, and you're right. Like I was just thinking about like how they leave the viewer basically in that case, or the reader.
Yeah. So anyway, I think I'm trying to figure that out. And then I've got another thread I need to open in there. So I think I have to put a chapter further in to kind of start up a thread that needs to be going. But I'm almost done with book 2. So it's not quite ready for beta readers, but the first solid draft will be done. Gosh, if I get real productive and don't lose my mind in next week, I might be able to do it here. Or I might have to start up when I get home. Finish when I get home, maybe September. And then the other one I've got going is the audiobook for Songless. So I'm working on that with Chris, as you guys know. He's going to do half the narration with me. And I'm actually in the same town he's in, so we're supposed to meet this afternoon to touch base a little bit. So that should be interesting. to get that audiobook out. I may need some beta listeners at one point. I might put a call out for that if anyone's interested in listening to the beta. It'll be a beta, so it again, when it's a beta, it's not going to be perfect. But if you hear anything, and yeah, I mean, that is the thing when you're doing audio, Michael. Where the last chapter I did, it made me absolutely nuts because the recording was really good, but there was like this rumbling, and I couldn't figure out where the rumbling was coming from or how to get rid of it. So it's like I just have to re-record those sections, and then you do that thing where you're in denial, like, oh, it's not that bad. And then you're like, yeah, it is that bad.
As soon as you start to question it, you got to go back and fix it.
It's so frustrating with audio because it's like, it's much harder to go back and fix. I'm getting better at it the more you do it. Hey, spirits. Hey, speaker. Welcome in. We're talking about where we're at with our projects. And
I asked you earlier when we talked a couple days ago about whether or not you took your equipment with you. I don't know.
I have it. I haven't been able to do anything with it. My son, when did he go in the door? So it's like every time I think I'm going to sit down and work on it, he needs some help. And then I don't know, more of my trauma dump.
I feel like it's probably easier to work on editorial in that setting than to do audio recording, but you could also do audio editing. So, I mean, just in terms of kind of prioritizing.
And I can listen to things. I brought it. I don't know how well the effects are going to be able to offset the room. I guess I could try it. And I probably will have some time to be able to do that going forward because we're shipping a car back here for him because evidently you need a car back here, which we didn't realize. So I'm having to wait for the car to show up. So I'm here a little longer, but it was so I'm here. But yeah, I mean, has anyone recorded in a space they don't normally record in? Or
I have, obviously, like recorded all over the place. Just being very, I don't know, improvisational or roguish with it. Yeah, gypsy. Yeah, in that sense. Like I've recorded music in different places. And some of my audiobooks I've kind of recorded while running around too, or in places that weren't always like wherever I was kind of like staged at for a time, like the documentary, which is also the audiobook for Chicago 1893. I recorded at one location, and then the next audiobook I had to have been somewhere else because that was like months and months apart. So now I use like a walk-in closet, so there's clothes and things that kind of absorb that. And I would say trying to replicate the space as best as possible that you use is going to create continuity in terms of the listening experience. So if you're in a small, like sound absorbent place, then you probably want to try and replicate that. If you're in a larger room that has any type of reverberation, that would be the same thing you would want to do for that.
Yeah, I don't know that I can, because I normally use an attic space that's got boxes and stuff all around me, and I can't. This is not all. There's no way to really replicate that.
What do you like? Is the attic finished or is it unfinished?
It's kind of unfinished, but it's got, it's an attic. It's got it's basically full of stuff because we've lived in the same house for 20 years. So if anyone's lived anywhere that long, you just accumulate things that you don't even know what they are anymore. So there's just stuff everywhere. So it just absorbs things. There's, clothes racks of stuff, suitcases, Christmas decorations and boxes. And then the ceiling has, oh God, my mind is blanking. What do you call this stuff? Insulation.
Mm-hmm.
Insulation. So there's insulation around me and just sort of stuff.
You might find that the room you're in doesn't sound too dramatically different. I would give it a test if you have the time, just to see, and also just to kind of like learn about how to work with that stuff.
Yeah.
That said, like, don't, if it sounds at all different, then just wait till you get back and do the actual proper recording.
The problem I have is I don't want to go punch in this, correct in a different room. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I did a whole chapter, but like punching in corrections in a different room might really make a difference.
Oh, yeah. No, 100%. Completely agree. Because like when I hear that stuff inside of an audiobook, like I immediately hear it. Yeah.
Hey, Plane Runner, how you doing? Anyone wants to come up and, put themselves on the chopping block? I'm not as far along as I'd like to be. I was hoping I would be more productive here since I'm alone, and I'm sort of focused on this, but it's not working out exactly like that. But I don't know. I should basically write some short stories about people losing their minds, because that's kind of more the zone I'm in at this point, and drinking bad coffee. But that's the only thing. What's interesting to me is I figured, hey, you always think of that when you're writing. You think, if I just go off into that cabin in the woods by myself, I will be able to get this all done. And so, I mean, in essence, I'm kind of in this cabin in the woods by myself. I mean, I have obligations of things I've got to deal with here still, which is why I'm still here. But I have a lot of time. But it's like it's not working out that way at all. It's very interesting to me that it's easier for me to focus in my own environment, even though there are all of the distractions of people and dogs and housework and all that stuff. So I would throw that out for people to consider. I don't know. Anyone else had that experience? If you guys want a mic, feel free. Just request. Love to hear from you guys. Spirit, Plane Runner, Speaker Cone, Puppy. There we go.
Speaker Cone is just me testing while we're in here.
I did not know that. Now I do.
Yeah.
Hey, Plane Runner. What's up?
Hey, how's it going? I'm just about to get on the road, but I could not resist commenting on what you were just saying. I remember years ago, I read the book No Plot, No Problem by the guy who started NaNoWriMo. And he had a whole section in that book where he talked about he thought that the thing that was separating him from like making it on Oprah's book list was writing at a cabin in the woods. And so he went off and he did that. And he said almost immediately he got up there and he couldn't write. He couldn't focus. He got involved in building some sort of weird, transom for the squirrels to jump from tree to tree on. And anyway, he just in the end said it's probably best if you aren't a full-time writer to try to just work it into the rhythm of your life, because as soon as you break those rhythms, it wrecks your writing rhythm. So anyway, just had to share that.
I think I just have that. I think I just did an experiment for him, and that's exactly what's happened to me. I'm afraid a little bit to write the last chapter, because if you just came in, I'm kind of on I've got like maybe 2 chapters I need to write for this book. Are you coming up, Speaker Cone?
Yeah, I'm just
anyway, sorry.
Testing.
No, so I have 2 chapters left. One I need to put in the book, and but the last one, I'm kind of afraid to write it here, kind of for the reasons you just outlined. Like, it's not going to be the right thing. I mean, I guess I could do it and just rewrite it, but it's weird. I don't know how else to say it. But
yeah, no, I get it. I think, I mean, it's funny. I wrote my first book, it was an hour here, an hour there at night or in the morning where I could find it. And I just kind of feel like if that's the way you sort of start out, until something really changes and you're like, J.K. Rowling or something like that, I think that's just kind of how we're built. It's like we just fit it in where we can. I think you even said that to me a couple weeks ago. I posted something like, how am I supposed to do all of this? And your response was simply catch as catch can, which I thought was great.
Oh, well, that's life, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, it's kind of annoying. It's like when you clear out your schedule to do it, it almost takes away that pressure you need to be creative.
Yeah, that's a perfect way of putting it.
I mean, I think creativity happens in a vice to a certain extent. So I don't know. Maybe I'm whining about my situation in an attempt to find the vice to put myself in, so I can get something done.
There's like processing that occurs. Sorry, I got a delay. I got to leave on here. There's processing that occurs, right, as we're working through any piece, whether that is in editorial or audio or pictorial content. And I'm not necessarily the type of person that says like you should do one thing and then another and be very sequential about things. Very much non-linear in the way that I approach creative work, in the sense that like some assets materialize before others do, and that's very much the same way that my stories kind of gather up. Right now, I'm working on like a handful of projects, and some of the images are there. Last night I was doing a little bit of script writing on some of that stuff. I've got a short story that I'm revisiting. Well, not even revisit every once in a while to make more progress on, that I intend to release in the spring next year. And jumping around between those things, or kind of thinking through what all you need to get it released, I feel like is viable. It doesn't have to be in some kind of like linear progressions. It doesn't always make sense that way, where you draw your inspiration from or what you feel like working on at any given time.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a certain amount of sense. And I think we're all wired a little differently on how we can do that. I mean, I think some people, can go to the cabin in the woods and finish something off. But it's weird when you get pulled out of your social structure. I mean, I think it's more useful when you go back into your zone, where you take that experience and you can use it there, at least for me. Because then you can sort of make sense of it when everything is sort of on an even keel. But a lot of times when you're in that sort of, I guess I'm using ocean metaphors. If you're in a storm, so to speak, of you don't. I guess let's just randomly say storm, not necessarily a bad storm, just whatever it is. You're focused more on dealing with that than you are on being able to use it to kind of make sense of it. I'm lost. You get the general idea of what I'm saying, anyone? Did that make sense on any level? Thank you, Puppy. Hey, Puppy, we haven't heard from you, my dear. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Heidi. It's good to see your avatar, hear your voice. Can you hear me okay on this headset?
Yeah,
yeah.
It's a little
weird.
It's a little distance, but I can hear you fine. If you're comfortable, go for it.
Okay. I've been carrying my phone around. I was going to try and run this on my MacBook, be on X, and then you and Michael sufficiently terrified me at the beginning what you were saying. But I figured, no, don't try to learn.
It's fine on desktop. The problem was I needed to reboot my phone for some reason.
Oh,
never had that happen.
Got it. Well, and I've been helping my mom with her technology, and that's funny to me. The boomer helps the almost 92-year-old, but, I guess she reached for the tool she had, and it was me. And can I just give a shout out? Sort of unrelated. I'm having a crush on Velcro lately. I like Velcro, fastening weird cords and whatever. Anyway, we've figured out my mom's, quote, landline, which was actually a Magic Jack thing, was a piece of wrist, and it's connected to the door in her building, so she still has to have that line. So anyway, suffice it to say, I have to slow way, way down with anything technology related these days, but I appreciate the space. And Heidi, I did just stick my hand up to say, not for nothing, I am a puppy grandma and also a grandma, but your son going away, your child going away to college for the first time, and whatever different things you're encountering there is an actual big deal, in my opinion. And so I'm not trying to patronize or whatever, but I also wanted you to know I thought about you, and I gushed about it to Michael in his space, but I not only got to hear I Draw Slow, but got to kind of hang out with them and sell their merch. And I kept thinking of you, and I mentioned you to the Louise, their singer, and how you their music had inspired your book. And I told her about the book, and I gave her the name. I think I gave her a snapshot of so you never know. You may make your way into their songs. And there was an interesting back and forth with the audience. And just for people who don't know, they're a group from Ireland, I Draw Slow. And conversation about, she would introduce the songs and tell a bit about the story of how it was written. And then a huge part of it was how the lyrics and the song came to mean many different things to folks in the audience, and how fascinating that was to the songwriters. But anyway, I digress. What if you just, it sounds like you're uncomfortable, you're not in your own, I know what that means. I'm a homebody, and I keep telling myself I want to travel, and usually when I get on the road, then I'm on my adventure. But yeah, nothing's regular unless you travel all the time and you just are up at 5 and you're riding for 2 hours. I don't know. But I would say, the other thing I was going to say is you're on the final chapter of volume 2. I mean, no pressure. What if you wrote like 5 different endings? Do you know what I mean? So I feel like you're at this huge thing in your life. There's big things going on, and you're like, I don't know what's different. So I'm sorry. I hope I'm not being offensive. I just mostly wanted to say hi. Do you know what I mean? Maybe you got to write about. I just remember the first kid, especially. I mean, just like they're in college. And they're young. They're still so young. They're wet behind the ears, and you're having to leave them there. Anyway, sorry to project.
I know, and I'm going to give him a card. I'm getting his car sent here. Well, he can't function around here, and they've got all these off-campus things because it's Nashville. I don't know. I don't mean to dox myself. Probably not smart. Well, but anyway.
So they don't have.
Do you not use your real name?
What's that? Yeah, I'm so doxed on here anyway. I'm like, it's like, I write. So it's like, it's my. If someone wanted to find me, it would take them about 5 minutes. I mean, it's ridiculous. I just whatever. I mean, hopefully it won't become an issue.
So he's not in Paris or Manhattan. You don't have a great public transit system there that people can easily use to get around. I'm sorry. That sucks. One of my kids went to school in the middle of a cornfield in Iowa, and I was like, that was the kid that never really liked to drive anyway, so we just did a bike work to get around that little town. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a little bigger, but it's really nice here, so I'm happy for him. And he's like called me this morning about his classes, and he's like just he really likes it. So I'm really happy about that. So I haven't heard him say anything negative, and he's got a pseudo date with someone this evening. So I'm just like, good grief. Anyway.
If I could send good coffee now,
yeah,
I would.
I don't. Yeah, I don't know
There's got to be good coffee.
He didn't pick her up in a coffee shop. He hasn't advanced to that yet, right? But
no, I meant for you. I'm like stacked.
No, sorry,
I know already.
So I'm gonna go get a cup of coffee. I can usually get one in the afternoon, but it's like Starbucks is my main choice, and I'm not a big Starbucks fan. But it's all right. It's all right. Like I said, it's more just. I think it's less the coffee and more just the scenario. But what do you do? It's what you want to happen. Just deal with it. So, but enough about my mom stuff. But thank you, puppy. I appreciate everything you said. Because I think sometimes, we try to make less of things that are really, really rough. But so I appreciate your understanding. I really, truly do. That said, does anybody else want to get scolded for not being far along, or anything else that you guys want to discuss, or some issues you're having where you're at with your stuff? Maybe it's one of your songs or something. Puppy or anyone else.
Well, for me, I'm still kind of getting ready to get ready. But what I've been doing, what you said about the house, when you 20 years, try since 1992, I've been in this place. So it's this archaeological dig / Depression era. What are these rusty tools? I think I can fix those. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm kind of enjoying it, and I'm running through things in my mind. But what I'm doing slowly outside and in is I'm getting organized. So the space that I started to make to be a place where I could do digital stuff and writing in, it's still too cluttered. So I'm literally still clearing out. And when I sit down and write, I don't quite have a regular practice yet. I do have a song that's partly written, but I've got other projects that I'm working on in the background. So I think my next step is, I'm also helping my mother a lot, kind of on call, but I'm loosely trying to get my day to where it is structured. And I'm finding for me, I wake up earlier than anyone else in the house. So my early morning time, is kind of my time for contemplation, being by myself. I'm thinking that's a natural time for me to start a writing practice. It really feels like I need to just, like with my guitar, my vocal stuff, just start doing it every day. I don't care if it's 5 minutes, but get into that regular habit, because otherwise I'm driven by project. I don't have the kind of multiple plates spinning in the air that you all do, and deadlines of production. I can't do that yet. That's too much like my career of law. But I'm eking toward having it be structured. And I've been doing a little bit more reading about writing and thinking about it. And so I'm kind of all over the place, a bit of a magpie. I'm just really interested in audio recording and what those tools are, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. So I'm kind of gathering things into different folders of resources at this point. It's not quite full-on binder yet, but I think that will really help me to have, like, all this stuff Michael posts. And I mean, you've all been so helpful. So I feel like kind of getting it in one spot so then I can be a little more orderly is where I'm trying to head. But at the same time, Michael, I appreciated so much what you said about kind of what I heard was, your process as an artist, depending on your medium, it's sort of more inductive. You're gathering things as you go, and you have a kind of confidence that when it's at the point, I don't know, I just really liked what you said to Heidi earlier about, essentially I heard, well, maybe it's not quite ready yet. You're percolating on it in your mind, and you're working on this project here, that, to there, but somewhere your mind or your consciousness is putting it all together in a way in the background. I kind of feel like I'm doing that too.
There's definitely...
I hit the button, puppy. It was my accident. I was trying to swipe up, and I hit the mute everyone. I apologize.
That's fine.
It's okay. I was pretty much trying to land my plane by trying to paraphrase what Michael was saying, because I just heard a generosity and an ease and a confidence there, and a confidence in you and in himself that was kind of contagious for me. So anyway.
Yeah, so I think that's what I was after in general. And I would say I give myself enough time, or I kind of carve out time for that portion of the process. But then I try to set deadlines too, and actually like hit those deadlines for release of material. So, I have like a handful of deadlines. Yeah, you're giving the thumbs down, but
that was my bad finger.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would say, that's important too, because it kind of gives you at least a sense of like, how can I stage the progress for this? And to get back to what we were talking about, like processing the work, if you're gathering up assets, or if you're drafting things, or if you're getting into editing, or you're doing packaging, which in terms of a book is layout. In terms of an audio book, it is getting the files prepared in terms of like mastering and mixing for distribution, and then also the other assets that go along with that, like the cover art. There are also peripherals that you can release with those, and the same thing that the things that you need for an audiobook are very much the things that you need for an album. So like later this year, early next year, I'll be working on the video series that goes along with Volume 3 of the Exploring Our National Parks, and I'll write all the music for that. And then I release that music as an album as well. So like there are 2 albums of music affiliated with that project, and what it takes to write those and kind of put them out. I just put them out on Bandcamp. It's like very low stakes release. I used to put out albums, like physical records with bands and stuff like that, and I'm not really compelled to do that anymore because I'm not a live performing musician at this point, or touring or anything like that. I don't necessarily need that merchandise around. But it still gives you an opportunity to, create a product or a promotional campaign around the project. And I would say you can do this with books too. Like if you have a playlist of songs you like that you feel like kind of dial into the energy of the tonality of what you're working on, you could put that out on Spotify, and that's something that you can promote around too. That's not something that I have done, but I have put together song lists, playlists on Spotify and made them public and stuff like that. They're completely unaffiliated, but all the same, it is something to think about.
I have a question, because I use a lot of music when I'm writing. I mean, I'll use a lot of, like, I have a song list for like the book, and that I use. I don't listen to it while I'm writing, but I'll listen to it when I'm, hammering out ideas in my head. So if I were to put something like that on Spotify, I mean, how will that benefit how would that benefit me? I guess in terms of marketing, just the list being out there, or
Well, you could put. I think you can. Well, let me double check. I feel like you can put like photos in there. Yeah, so like you could put up like a custom photo if you wanted, and it could be the cover of the book on that playlist. You could use, so it's like a square image, but you could use the audiobook image, which will have to be squared, and you could put that on there, and then you can do like a description on there as well. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so like you have an optional description, and you can basically call the playlist song list by Heidi Hill, and then put a description and say like, these are the songs I listen to while ideating song list. Check out my book, and you can probably put a link in there. I would assume it might not activate the link, but all the same. Or you could put your website in there, and yeah, I would say like that's a viable option in that sense. You could even link to that playlist on your website or on social, and just give yourself something to talk around for a period of time.
And I guess, yeah, I wondered about doing something like that, because I see sometimes people put lists out or playlists out from music, and that's an interesting idea. So I'll have to work on that one.
Yeah, and that's like an easy promotional mechanism. And like, will it get a slew of turns for you? I don't know. I haven't done it, but at the same time, it's definitely not going to be a negative in that sense. Like if you're putting stuff out there, bands like being on song lists or playlists, and it kind of helps their numbers, or it just kind of like drives the aesthetic of what you're doing around the project at large.
That's an excellent idea, actually. Because especially if you're using them. Because music is kind of interweaved in my stories, so
Yeah,
that would make a certain amount of sense. All right, guys. So, what else is anyone working on? Spirits, we haven't heard from you. How's your website going? I know you're a listener. If you can come up, love to hear what you've got going. No. How about you, Dan? You got a project going?
Well, I'm going to be starting. There's like creative writing classes at the local like community center building that are starting on Monday that I'm going to start attending. And recently, like today, I enjoy writing, but like the motivation or incentive that I get out of it is like trying to like push myself to like learn new skills. I really like doing that. I enjoy doing that. So I've done quite a bit of prose, but today I was wondering. I've been like collecting, seeing how like many film scripts are online, and there are just tons of them. And I've been starting wondering like how someone does that, and like if those are the same skills, or how similar are those skills to writing and prose, basically. So, I love creativity in general. You said that I'm quite into Star Trek, but like when I was a kid, like I just thought, well, like what's like really creative storytelling? And I thought, well, if it's if your scope is not just a room or a house or a planet or a galaxy or like a universe, well, that's quite creative, it seems to me. And what sort of genre deals with things in that sort of scale? Well, often sci-fi. And at that time, when I was a kid, I was like, well, I really liked watching stuff on TV and stuff, and I did like Star Wars then, but like Star Trek had like so many years of being on TV at the same time. So I thought like that's gonna surely like helps increase the imagination even more, which I find can be difficult being on the autistic spectrum. I find imagination can potentially be quite difficult. I think I had an easier time with that as a kid, being able to think up stories and stuff like that. And I'm just like in my adult life, like especially recently, like I'm just trying to see if I can like return my imagination, basically to being that powerful in a way, or that sort of thing. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I was listening to this book. It's a series of lectures. Wise Philosophy recommended it. I asked, and it was just talking about how your fluid intelligence is at its peak when you're 15 years old, which I thought was wonderful, right? Because you're at your most, and fluid intelligence is that creative part where is problem solving, right? There's like crystallized intelligence versus fluid intelligence. It's like crystallized intelligence is like facts and all of that stuff, but the fluid intelligence is. So that's when you were saying that you were able to come up with stories more when you were younger. I was thinking it reminded me of that. But I think, in terms of that, it's like I sort of saying this either it's like that vice, and you have to kind of put yourself in a bit of a vice, put yourself in new situations, kind of, and that tends to force your mind to be more to focus on a fluid thing, because you have to learn new things. Like you have to learn how the roads work, or you have to figure out how to get from place A to place B. I mean, that's kind of a type of way of stimulating that, I think. Also, like, if you go for a walk every day, take that walk and do the same walk but in a different direction, and everything will look different, and it messes is kind of the wrong word. It stimulates your mind, I think, in those situations. I use music that way a lot to stimulate my story ideas. I'll start getting stories when I listen to songs. Outside of whatever it is the song is necessarily about, music in general will do that for me. I don't know if that's true for everybody else, but so I'll always be sort of searching for a song that has the right feel, or something around what I'm trying to communicate, and the idea and the music will sort of spur the creative focus for me. Or the ideas, right? They'll start coming that way. Also, like exercise, like, getting on a treadmill or just doing something like that also does it for me too. And I don't know if that helps or not, but those are the things. And then just doing the work, right? What is the thing they say? How many hours do you have to do something to be an expert at it? Is it 100,000 hours?
What is the Malcolm Gladwell? It's 10,000 hours, but I don't know that that's necessarily correct.
I don't know either, but I do know that the more you do something, the better you get at it, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
It's hard to say if there's some point at which everyone is a master. It's like, at this point in life, I could practice ballet for 10,000 hours. I doubt I'd be a prima ballerina.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I think that when in your life you start matters for some things, but then also there are just some particular skills that are not good for later life, or like the other side of it is maybe there are some that are not good for early life too. You can write anytime. I don't know that our writer's early work's always the best. I'm re-listening to Pynchon's Against the Day right now, and I read it a few years ago, and a lot of people like Gravity's Rainbow, that won a notable award in the 70s, but it's not my favorite of his books. Against the Day is, and it's 30 years later. I think he started those two around the same time, maybe in the like 60s at some point. But Gravity's Rainbow is really frantic and dense, whereas Against the Day is not frantic, but equally dense and considerably longer as well. And it just, I don't think he could have written that book when he was in that frantic pace of writing. I think that like how he evolves as a writer, what he was doing, what he was focusing on, and his style becomes more comfortable with what he developed in, you know, the 3 decades between those two books. And obviously, like, he released material before Gravity's Rainbow as well. So I don't know, you know, there's certainly people like his early work, and he got acclaim for mid-career work. I mean, he's still alive, so he might put out another book at some point. I don't know. But for me, the book that like just has, it's very challenging to contain all of the information and the characters because it's like 1,100 pages, but it also goes over, it kind of spans the course of like 3 decades of time through the plot. It's just, it's a lot. There are it's kind of focused around one family, but they all travel a lot and weave into different, like what they're doing during different eras is a focal point that evolves over the course of the book. And I'm not sure that like he could have put all that together that way when he was like a younger writer. Maybe he could, but he didn't.
I would, you know, that's a really good point you bring up about what are you capable of doing at a certain age with whatever maturity you have, you know? And I think that should be taken into consideration. I mean, you have people who, and I could compare this with music, right? You have people who are like one-hit wonders, right? And that's their first song they wrote. They just knock it out of the park, and then nothing else ever amounts to whatever it was they did with that one song, right?
Right.
Or that one book. They're trying to think of, you know, I would say, oh God, Joseph Heller might be kind of a one-hit wonder with like Catch-22, right? It's an amazing book, and it really kind of captures the moment, but I don't think he ever wrote anything after that was anywhere near as good. I mean, he's not like, God, what's the fellow who wrote The Right Stuff? Thomas Wolfe. Is it Tom Wolfe? Do I got the name right? I feel like I've got the name wrong.
I'm not sure.
Anyone? Thomas Wolfe. He wrote The Right Stuff, and I think his last book was A Man in Full, and he wrote Bonfire of the Vanities. This fellow. I think it's Tom Wolfe. Anyway, he kept going, right? He kept going with good books. And it's just, I mean, there's something to be said about how much, there's 2 things, right? There's like, what can you write at your age? I think there's a lot of truth in that, you know, where it's like, I couldn't write the book I'm writing right now when I was in my 20s, even though the characters are more or less in their 20s, but I can do it. I mean, some of them are much older, but I can do it now because I have a retrospect of that. I have more life experience. I know what it's like to have been that age, and I can see it more clearly. You know, hindsight is 20/20. So these are things to consider. And I've heard that said a lot, where people will say, you know, it was too big of a story for me to tell when I was younger, you know? And I think there's something to consider there. It's sort of like, you know, maybe you've got this great idea, but it's just not, you don't have, is it maturity? Is it skill? I mean, you know, experience? you don't have that. I mean, these are things to consider, which is one of the things I kind of think is kind of neat about writing. Is it's sort of like it's just like you're always going to be different at it at a different age. Just kind of like if you read a book when you're 15 and then you read it again when you're 30 and you read it again when you're 50, it's going to be it's going to be a different story for you. Right? So I think it goes both ways with that. I'm kind of getting off base, but I think that's kind of an important thing to consider, kind of what you were pointing out there. I don't know. What do you guys think of that? No.
It's cool. I've recently listened to a YouTuber who was convinced that basically like the odds that the first book that you'll write or whoever will write are like 99.9% sure that it'll be rubbish. Basically, that was his point in the YouTube video, and I don't think that's necessarily true. I agree with what you're saying. Like it will be different, at a different time of your life, and not necessarily worse. The first book you try to read to write. I mean,
yeah. I mean, the first book I finished is the one that I've got out. No one seems to tell me it's rubbish, unless you're all lying to me. But so I don't know if I believe it either, Dan. I think you can't necessarily always listen to what everybody says, because it's been my experience that everybody has reasons why you can't do it. Oh, this won't be good. You can't do that, and etc. So forth. It's you can't. You have to just if you think if it's your first thing you wrote, you think it's good, just keep pounding away at it. If that's the story you want, just pound away at it. Just beat it into shape. Do what you got to do. That's what I would say.
I watched this documentary on Salinger recently, who's also in that sort of private recluse category with Pynchon. But he attained, just massive fame off of one book. He had been writing short stories and had, those collected and then did some other books. But again, like he never, I don't really think, has hit the same level of appreciation with his other work as he did with Catcher in the Rye.
No.
Yeah, I mean, is that like a matter of his spending that amount of time on it, or being early in his career and not necessarily like sheltering himself away, hiding the work away? There's definitely like a weird career arc for him in general, as he kind of like gets into the bunker and just keeps writing but never releases anything. Hopefully some of that stuff will come out at some point, but the other side of it, it's twofold in the sense that like we can't evaluate it and he can't fail against that early success. It's kind of a weird situation that he staged for himself. But you find that stuff with bands too, like their early work, becomes the most popular later on. Maybe they get a little bit repetitive or commercialized. It's hard to say, like, is late stage band commercialization the same as like early stage band success commercialization? There was a good point in that documentary about Salinger, in that he was really working very hard on that book for a number of years to be insightful and elevated, and it became incredibly popular because it was so the statement was so commonly accepted that, like, in his effort to make it very insightful and elevated, it became just this very commonplace set of observations about being young and the divide that you witness in society.
Yeah, I have two minds on that. Yeah, I think you brought up a good point about Salinger being maybe afraid to release anything else because he did so well that, his ego got in the way. It was a pride thing. What if I put, I mean, if he was riddled by that, I don't know. I know he's kind of a enigmatic figure. I've heard various things about him, negative, positive. I don't know exactly. One of the things I know about bands, about music, is they'll have spent years figuring out that first album and it's a massive hit, and then they've got a year to follow it up. It's like you get into a cycle where you don't have the kind of time you need to create in the same way you did before, is one thing. And I always I feel bad, but I think the Twilight series suffered from this, where I think that she had this big success and she was unable and got pushed to finish it up. And I think that's why you have such a lackluster ending, shall we say. And you have to have a certain amount of tenacity, I think, to fight that off. If you look at something like J.K. Rowling with the Harry Potter series, she managed to hold it together. But I also think that she wrote the entire series before the first book became popular. She had it all outlined and all worked out before. So I think that was one of the reasons. So she already kind of knew where she was going. So when you are able to sort of, it's one thing you have that outline, but when you go into write, you are rewriting in your head, you're refining, you're carving it out, you're making things more, you're maintaining the story, you're improving the story. So I mean, that's, I think, what happens to a lot of bands with music. They just kind of hit and then they don't know where to go, and then it's all that stuff you're saying where the marketing people come in and they've got, oh, you got to get your next album out by this date, or if no ifs, ands, or buts. And in a way, if you think about the schedule of something like that, it's almost amazing if someone can put out 2 or 3 albums that don't suck, in a row. What do they call it? The sophomore slump, right? So I think that's one of the things you're dealing with. And it's just the creative process. I've also seen things where I've read something, I remember reading this in like a psychology primer or something, where it's sort of like there's this idea that, and I don't follow this too closely, but there's this idea that you have just X amount of creativity. This is a theory. So, and I don't know. It's the theory is you have, this is your cup. Your cup is filled with X amount of creativity. And once you use it up, it's over, it's done, and you will do nothing worthwhile going forward. So I don't know if I believe that, but I mean, it's something to throw out there. I wouldn't get too sucked into it because it'll just be an excuse not to do anything, is in my mind.
Yeah, I don't agree with that idea that like you only have so much creativity. It just seems like a cop-out kind of approach to things.
Yeah, well, it's a theory in a psychology book, so we'll give it the credit it deserves. I think if you want to keep going, I mean, I don't know what happened to J.D. Salinger. He sounded like a pretty messed up guy from what I know about him.
Yeah, I think that definitely there were some like underlying issues for him, and then that kind of got exacerbated by the fame, for sure. Like I obviously like I don't think I should speak on it just from having like watched one documentary that probably has its own angle on those things. But at the same time, like that's just the takeaway. If there was any comment I would make about who he was as a person and him as a career, as a writer, I guess I would make it those couple things. I don't consider him necessarily to be incredibly prolific after the success, and maybe that goes hand in hand with kind of removing himself from public life and living on his land in New Hampshire. There was another thing I was going to talk about, though. Gosh, I can't remember what it was. Related back to something you had said.
The pressure for a release.
No, I feel like it was further back, but it'll come back to me.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I mean, J.D. Salinger managed to kind of live the rest of his life on that mystique. We can give him that was kind of clever. And you know what's interesting is, I mean, a lot of the younger generations do not like that book. They don't like Catcher in the Rye. They're just like, whatever. And I wonder if, it just hit his generation quite specifically. Something that's kind of interesting. George, how are you, sir? I saw you come in. What's going on? Have you killed any protagonists lately?
I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate that more than you could say. In honor of Michael, what I did was I got out some graph paper and I made a chart of all the protagonists that I was going to kill. And with respect to your point about limited creativity, what this chart found is if you're willing to kill all of your characters, that in fact the amount of creativity that you can create with these characters tracks 1-to-1 in a linear plan that goes all the way to the top of the graph. Because every time you create a character, you create the opportunity for a new and creative way to kill them. And this is what you call life.
Sorry. Thank you, George. That is what you call life. I'm sorry about that. I thought Michael was going to chime in. It's actually kind of a good point you bring up, frankly, this idea of I'm trying to think about what to say.
Sorry, I was on another window. Yeah,
That's
glad
okay.
it worked for you.
That's okay. We all stepped away for a second. I thought you were going to talk longer, George. I should know you're always.
I get that a lot. People are always surprised that I'm brief. I got in an argument once on national television with a columnist by the name of Andrew Coyne, and he was talking about tired rhetorical devices, and he was criticizing some politician for using tired rhetorical devices. And I said, sure, Andrew, that's a fair criticism. These are tired rhetorical devices. But can you think of a single rhetorical device that isn't tired? And he gave me a one-word response, and he said, brevity. And I conceded the argument. I'm like, you win, Coyne, you win.
So it's not a bad point. I mean, I've read books where it's especially if it's a series, right? Where you just get tired. You're just like, they're just trotting their characters through a story, through a scenario, because everybody loves their characters and they want to keep going. It's kind of like dare I mention Stephen King, right? Like Misery, where he felt like he just had to keep going with it. He was that story Misery that he wrote. Is everyone familiar with it, right? Where the author just felt like he had to just keep writing this character who was miserable because everybody loved it, and then this crazed fan is just like, but you have to keep going. There is some truth of like knowing when the life is over. I think that we don't really like to admit that. I mean, you get something like even like Star Wars, right? Which was, I'm not going to bring up Star Wars. I think it was handled terribly, but Star Trek maybe a little bit, where Captain Kirk finally comes to an end. They all finally come to their end, and they start a new story within that world with new characters, which is an interesting idea. It's a risk, though, right? Because what if people like the old characters more than they like the world? Once you get, I don't know. But I mean, it's not an invalid point that you make about that. I know you're kind of tongue in cheek about it.
Yeah, but I'll go further than that. And I see Dan Leckie is here, so I can make my obscure Star Trek references. On the last season of the Picard spinoff, they made a new character who is outrageously popular, Captain Liam Shaw, the commanding officer of the USS Titan. And shortly after you meet him, they kill him off. So not only am I in favor of killing old characters, but you can kill new characters as well. And the very nature of like death is you're supposed to be like upset by the missed opportunity of the life that they could have had. And some of the absolute best writing in Star Trek, including the Next Generation Season 7 episode Lower Decks, which will always go down as one of the greatest episodes ever, where they kill a young ensign behind enemy lines on Cardassia on the very same episode that they introduce her. It like goes to show, like, you don't have to write 7 seasons with your character before you kill her off. I mean, Hamlet was only in 1 episode. The Scottish King was only in 1 episode. Romeo gets 1 episode. There are all kinds of characters who get 1 episode, die young, and just in the history of literary criticism, like, people thought Hamlet was too long, right? Like, people thought War and Peace was too long, right? But those things are still exponentially shorter than any television show being made today. Like Ned Stark got 9 times as much screen time as Prince Hamlet did, and people still think that he died, too early. So our threshold for killing off the young and killing off new characters has moved since the Elizabethan period in a way that is unnatural, and in a way that only reflects the desire of TV writers and producers to syndicate characters and create new seasons.
Well, that's it. It's a marketing thing that we keep our characters alive. And I mean, that's not an invalid point if you're writing story. I mean, and it is marketing. A tragedy kills characters. It's like this need to bring them back. Hey, that character was super popular. We got to bring him back. And it's sort of like the pirate and these continuing sequels and everything. It's like, I mean, that's kind of what everybody wants. They don't want 1 book. They want 3 books, or they want the whole set of something. They want a whole world. They want to just continue to go in there if they liked it. It's not enough. So it makes it impossible to kill characters. It also makes it, or you have to bring them back to life, which is the other thing. Of course, if it's Sean Bean is, I would guess, your favorite actor, George, because he dies in everything.
I do enjoy Mr. Bean. And there is one movie where he stays alive and he lives to the end. It's about a British Special Forces mission during the first Gulf War, where they go behind enemy lines in Iraq to kill Scud missiles. And it's called Bravo 20. It's based on a real-life mission where 8 Special Forces soldiers go on this mission. 3 die, 4 are taken captive. 3 of them write books upon their return, and of those 3 books, 2 are made into movies. One of those movies stars Sean Bean. highly recommend Bravo 20. I hope I haven't spoiled the end by letting you know that Sean Bean lives.
He also lives in Sharp's Rifles, but
That's another great example. I'm a huge Sharp fan.
my husband got me into watching the Sharp's Rifles. He's all
There's 40 shillings on the drum for those who volunteer to come.
oh my gosh. Anyway, but everybody else dies in Sharp except by the end of it, except for him and Harper, the two guys. Does anyone know where? I know Dan's got to know Sharp, but anybody else know Sharp's Rifles or the Sharp series? No. Yeah, it's actually pretty good. It's a BBC series from the mid to late 90s, probably. And it's about the Napoleonic Wars, the Peloponnesian War specifically. I think it's mostly in Spain, but they move around. Anyway, it's based on a series of books by Bernard Cromwell, which I haven't read the books, but I suspect they're pretty good. I've read the openings of a couple of them. But anyway, all right, guys, where are we? So, yeah, as we were talking earlier, Plane Runner pointed out that Clint Eastwood held onto the script for Unforgiven for quite a while. He said he felt like he wasn't ready to play that part or tell that story. Kind of going back to that. And Dan, you had asked a question about script writing. Is it different than other types of writing? And, it is. It's much more vague, I think. It's much more just the dialogue. And, I mean, if you look at a screenplay, it's dialogue. You describe the characters. I mean, you have a list of what the person looks like. You're not describing them as you would in prose. So it's more of a stripped down form of writing, I think.
Yeah, I've read quite a few of the Star Trek ones, and I'm now progressing on to reading other movie ones and stuff like that. I wondered, with it being such a visual medium, does that mean show not tell is even more important?
Yeah, I would think. I mean, I think it's also easier to a certain extent because you can literally just have a picture. You don't have to describe anything. I mean, that is one of the things. Michael, did you say you'd worked on some screenplays?
Not specifically. We kind of will put together scripts for our AI video work, but it's kind of light. It's not necessarily formal in the way you would see for television or film, because for us, we're basically trying to render clips and scenes, and if something doesn't want to work, then you can go back and kind of rework the material at an outline level. So in that way, I suppose, but it's very different for the way we're working versus traditional screenplay writing, because we don't always know that we're going to be able to get out of the engines what we put on the paper. It kind of depends on how much time you want to spend on it, or how much image prep you want to do, or compositing, or layering, or breaking apart of images that you have. So it's not quite, I wouldn't say, as reliable as traditional animation or CGI or live action material. You have to be a little more fluid with it.
Well, yeah, I mean, so for script writing, my understanding, I mean, you're basically, it's dialogue heavy. So, and then you can set up the scenes, but you're showing and not telling is all in the dialogue. You're not going to be able to describe, you can't use descriptions the moon was setting, but you can put it in that this is happening at night. And so you have to, you're conveying the same information. It's just you're tweaking it to fit the medium. You know what I mean? So that's how I view it. And I think that's kind of what Michael was saying, is it's just fluid. You're working with it to fit whatever medium you've got going.
It's kind of weird too for the video for Tartaria. Like, I think I've talked about this before. Like, it really started as just a collection of images, and then I wrote the story around those images. And it was going to be a narrated piece originally, and then they opened up on Runway lip sync, so I was able to kind of bring some of the narrative into the mouths of the characters as opposed to making it kind of third person material that way. And that changed in the middle of producing that. It wasn't a planned sort of thing. It just kind of became viable, so I did it. There's stuff I'm working on now that's a little bit more out in front, because we have the expectations that we'll be able to do lip sync, and we are, testing different like image styles, like art styles and things like that, to see how they take to the software. So yeah, I mean, and then there's like some other tools that we're kind of playing around with too, to where we can more reliably front load the scripting aspect and know that we're going to be able to bring characters to life or bring scenes to life the way that we need them to be. So it's definitely something I'm doing more of, but like I wouldn't call myself like highly experienced in like screenplays or script writing in any sense.
But I think you bring up a good point there. Is like, the scripts are written for like what resources are available and stuff like that. And it occurred to me just now, like, it seems like you need to keep like budget in mind more than, well, with a novel, basically like anything you can imagine happen.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it depends, right? I mean,
Yeah.
You can write whatever you want to write, but yeah, you're probably not going to have a real high budget. But, with CGI these days, they can do, I mean, it may not look the best, but you can do a lot. I mean, that's my understanding.
Yeah, but even then, like, the cost of CGI can be quite expensive as well.
Well, yeah. The other thing too, I think that's different about script writing is it becomes a much more community project. So if say I'm writing a book, I pretty much have control over it because I'm writing the book. But when you're doing a script, you've got the story, but then you've got a director coming in interpreting it. You have actors coming in interpreting it. You have people saying, hey, I want to say this here, that kind of thing. So I think when you're in that scenario with writing, it's much more of a living document, shall we say, than a book is to a certain extent. It becomes its own world, and everyone who comes into it will have some effect on it. Even if the actor goes and says everything word for word, it's still going to be coming out of their mouth the way they say it, that kind of thing. And you have to kind of, so there's another level of it. I'm kind of experiencing that by doing an audiobook. It's like, I can say everything. I'm narrating half of it, so I can say everything the way I see it. But like Chris, who's doing the male point of view, it's not going to be me. And I had to, on some levels, I had to work with that and kind of let that go. So when you start collaborating with other people in your projects, you have to actually collaborate with them and let them have their piece of it. Which I think is challenging. I think it's one of the problems that happens with scripts and with writers, and a lot of times why writers get banished from the set, I've been told, because they want everyone to do, it's my story and you need to do it my way. But once it's in a movie and there's all these other people involved, it's theirs too. And I think, and I totally get why that's really hard for people to understand. From the writing perspective, it's challenging from the writing perspective to deal with that, because so that's one of the things about script writing that I think is harder, is that is this idea that it's going to become a collaboration. It's not just what you have to say. Hey, puppy, can you hear us now? You said you're having trouble.
I am. I'm almost afraid to speak. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was trying to post something earlier, and not to derail the conversation, but it was started when Dan was speaking. But are either you, Michael, or Heidi, or Dan, or anyone, are you familiar with Linda Barry, an artist, teacher, writer, comic?
No, maybe if you told me about her work, I might connect her, but I don't know her off the top of my name.
Yeah, Heidi. Well, I'm a little different generation. She went to a school in Washington called the Evergreen State College, which was sort of a new state school, but envisioned to be a really different kind of learning environment. And I had family that went there too. And she produced a syndicated column in alternative papers for years. I'll always be fond of Poodle with a Mohawk. Anyway, her work is kind of amazing, but she's now, I think, she's from originally, I think, Wisconsin, and is there now and teaches there. And she's done lots of writers' workshops and creativity workshops. And I just heard about her on a podcast the other day where the author was talking about being literally at a writer's workshop and how she led part of it and how everyone was writing their butts off after her workshop. And so her work has to do with, I think, with the origin of creativity. It has to do with freeing up. One of her things is, it's almost, okay, let me badly paraphrase it. Everything you knew about being creative, you knew when you were 3. And now kind of getting back to that, and it almost reminds me of synesthesia, or a crossover of, where you can see how something smells, if that makes sense. I feel like the cross connectivity, particularly Michael, you do so much visual work, but I'm thinking, for me, to kind of kickstart me, the songs that it seems like that I want to write, or they enter me, a lot of them have to do with my kind of origin story, my childhood, me. And so anyway, Linda Barry, I was going to throw something like, picture moms of childhood friends. Now pick out one of them in your mind. Now write a story, and here's your prompt. But then some of it was just literally, the guy on the podcast was sharing that she's having people draw, and her art is images and words and everything all scribbled together. So I'll be quiet and post something of hers now. And anyway, I hope that was useful, and I didn't mean to derail your conversation about scripts. I know that's a whole other thing. And writing what they call a treatment, and getting it produced, whatever. But I just thought, in terms of creative cross-pollination, Linda Barry's work is very fascinating.
Uh-oh, looks like we lost Michael. So it sounds like, let's see if we can get him back. All right. No, that's, yeah, I mean, that is part of the thing, right? Is being able to be creative. It's not easy. I mean, and you're always looking for ways to sort of stimulate that, right? So that's kind of an important thing to consider. How do I make myself, how do I get my imagination rolling? What works for me? I think that helps you go forward. And then, I mean, we're talking about getting stuff done. Maybe it might be good to mention the reality of, having to be orderly, having to sit down and have a list and do that kind of thing and say, this is what I'm going to work on today. And I have, for me, I think the best thing that helps me is like the 1,000 words a day or whatever number works for you. That's kind of a good thing to start with. And getting that done, as I said, can be challenging because every day can be different. At least it is usually for me. So, I mean, having these lists or having these check-ins, I think accountability with each other is good. I mean, I think we can. I like this idea that Michael came up with. Sorry, dropped my phone. That we meet like once a month and just be accountable for what we're working on. So maybe, we're winding down. We've got another 15 minutes. Maybe a good thing to do would be sort of like by the next time we do this workshop, what do you plan to have done? Might be a good thing. What have you got that you want to make sure you have done so you'll have accountability in the room? I think that would be an important place to start.
I'll go first since I feel like that's fair. I think I'll have the audiobook for Tartaria out by the next time we do this. If not by then, certainly like the very next week. It's not going to take a whole lot of production. Obviously, like I have to edit all of the narrative read, which is my least favorite part to do. But all of the sound effects and things like that I'll use in the audio drama version, I already have them available and sitting in the file because I used them for the video originally and did that as a stereo mix. So I have to move all that stuff around, but it doesn't necessarily take as much work as like going and digging up the resources and then kind of listening to them and seeing how they fit together. It's more moving them around and adjusting the mix in terms of volume for the read that I performed. So yeah, I think that'll be out. Certainly want to get it turned around relatively quickly because I'm kind of getting into layout for volume 3. So I'll probably have that out and have begun the layout for volume 3 by the next time that we do this.
That sounds good. So Dan, do you have a plan? Is there something you want to get accomplished on your creative side in the next month or so?
Well, I'd like to read through the first film script I've read through, and as I said, I'm about to start taking a class on a Monday evening at a local community centre place and in creative writing. And apparently, like I've looked into what that involves, and apparently, like there's homework that will require. So I'm not sure what sort of homework that is. Like apparently is geared towards like new writers, which in the grand scheme of things, even though I've written up quite a few like interviews and quite a few like non-fiction articles with more creative writing, I am a beginner. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's a good setup. I mean, you got to just small, those look like good steps to me. I love that you're taking a class. I mean, it's good to connect with people who are interested in that, especially in like kind of a low key situation like that. It's a lot. Mm-hmm. It just kind of gives you some space to kind of figure it out, with everybody who's kind of in the same scenario. So it feels better, it helps you build your confidence in what you're doing. So who else should I put on the block here? Who else? Puppy, have you got a plan for the next month?
Oh, sorry. That wasn't a joke. I was waiting for the punchline. No.
The punchline.
Heidi, I don't know. Part of why I'm doing my archaeological, Great Depression, these rusty tools thing, part of that is I'm working on creating a space in my backyard where I could host music and or other events where people who are immune compromised or people that are highly COVID cautious could come. And so I'm literally, as you can imagine, as a retired lawyer, I'm seeing liability with every board. So part of it for me, I think, is literally as I'm doing this retirement thing, which I kind of feel like a kid again, or, like your son, right? Like, wish mom would get out. No, just kidding. But I get to make it up and structure it how I want. And it's, like I said, building in a time to do writing. I'm still assembling lots of tools and things and spaces. So I guess for me, maybe what could I commit to within a week? How about I actually sketch out a schedule, like a daily schedule that maybe I could do and still be working on my bigger projects. I think I need to create kind of a production schedule for myself rather than just like what Michael said, pick a date when I want to have my space ready. And you know what? If it's not all done, put construction yellow tape around the part that isn't done. I think the perfectionism might be getting in my way. So I think picking a couple concrete dates where it's like, oh my gosh, my friends are really coming over. And my one friend is sight impaired. So do I have the path for her? I think maybe just, if that makes sense, just scaling it down so that I actually reach my goal or part of my goal, which is to be able to host people who love music who have not been able to be indoors sharing air with others. Even if that's it. Sorry, so I'm thinking out loud. I think that's what I need to do is pick a date for my first event. Even if that event ends up being 3 frickin' people, that will matter. And so there, thank you for letting me think out loud about that. Yeah.
That's excellent. You got to write a song sometime. I want to hear your song when you get yourself going. But, all right, Plane Runner, you've taken a mic. We're going to put you, I know you want to be accountable.
Yeah, no, I'm doing well. I'm making good progress. I think you said a month, right? Not a week.
It's a month. Yeah, we do this. We do this once a month. So next week we'll be more focused on, like, I don't know, the craft.
Characters next week.
Is it characters? Okay. We'll see.
Yes.
Everyone bring their favorite character.
So in a month, let's see. I've already posted this in the pill, but in a month I will be through with the first pass of my copy edit with my editor, and we will be diving into again those lingering things, little things we want to tighten up before layout, and then I will also, Lord willing, have my cover. I will have met with my cover artist. We will have gone over ideas. We will have probably chosen a direction at that point and be well underway artistically there. So I'm excited. Those are the two big things that I'm going to clear out in the next month. And in the meantime, probably do a little more research on ISBNs and copyright and, those kinds of things. And when I have time, I'll be either chipping away at the sequel or throwing up micro short stories on X.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you know when you're releasing this?
Yeah. So I've got a lot going on in my personal life right now. And my original intent was to release in the middle of November. I was really, really hoping to get it out before Thanksgiving. I think more realistically, in light of what we've got going on, I'm probably going to have to push to, I'm looking at January 10th.
Reasonable, yeah. Are you self-publishing or are you working with a publisher? Yeah.
Self-publishing.
Are you trying to broadly distribute or are you just using Amazon?
At this point, I'm going to buy my own ISBN so that I can go other places. But I will, and I'm probably going to go through Ingram Sparks for the printing. But I will, at this point, just stick with Amazon.
I don't see, if you're just sticking with Amazon, I wouldn't even take the time to deal with Ingram Spark or the ISBN. I'll be honest with you.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
I appreciate
my
that.
personal opinion on it. Like if you were working with a publisher, then I would say for sure go get that ISBN. But like you can use your ASIN on Lulu, I'm pretty sure as well, and they do print on demand and ebook distribution. Okay. But like if you're not going to like jump through all those other hoops, like you're just adding cost onto yourself. You know what I mean? Okay. And it's not fundamentally worth it. Like the majority of my sales come from either Amazon and like more and more prevalently audiobooks, which if you intend to do that at some point in the future, like ACX is Amazon's platform for distribution through Audible, Amazon, and Apple Books. And it basically, as soon as you start to create the title on there, it's going to ask you to link it up with your listing on Amazon. Like they don't even care about other services on there. And even the other distribution platform I use for my audiobooks does not care about like any other distribution. I mean, they have places for ISBN, but it's not required. They don't ask about it at all. And I'm in libraries and, you know, everywhere else. So,
well, I appreciate the tip there, because I think my only hang up has been I'm not crazy about the printed hardcover that Amazon does, and I wanted the ability to print something or with a traditional dust jacket, and I didn't see that was an option there.
Yeah, it's not currently.
They do a case laminate is what you get on Amazon.
And some people like them, and I think they work fine for certain things, but I think
you're a snob. Admit it.
I'm actually not a snob, because I'm usually the guy that waits for the soft cover. But I don't know. I just always, if I'm going to go with a hardcover, I love the jacket, you know.
The dust jacket's cool. Yeah, I really wish they did have that option. And I can imagine that at some point they do open that up. It really is not a big step forward in like production, in regard to production. Like they're already dealing with paper and binding and everything else. So
I suspect they'll have it too. It's just a matter of when, and it's just a matter of demand. If they feel like there's enough demand, they'll do it. Yeah. But I feel you. I mean, I've got my hardcovers are case laminate. I like them. I did like a matte though. I mean, I'm okay with it. But I hear you. There's a certain dignity to a dust cover.
I don't even know if it's, I mean, and you and I have, you know, chatted separately about the cover work. And so, you know, there's a part of me that's like, yeah, I would love to showcase that a little more. But anyway, that's my plan in a month. And I do appreciate, thanks, Michael, for just the advice there. I haven't looked as seriously into it. I'm still in that gathering information stage when it comes to the actual publishing.
Sure.
So I appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean, if you were going to take even more time, if you were going to like go find an agent and all the rest of that, like query through that, I mean, and like, you know, it's your work. You're welcome to do whatever you like. You're not going to get it out by January, even if you pursue that. And inside of that, I just don't really think it matters if you're not going to go through all of that process. So that I would say, like, just save yourself the headache and the money. And like, you're probably already spending plenty on a designer and an editor. So like adding on the extra money for ISBN and Ingram Spark in front of Amazon, I mean, it's, you know, X amount of hundreds of dollars additional on top of that. So, you know,
just out of curiosity, would you recommend still copywriting it, or would you just go straight to publish?
So here's the thing about copyright. As soon as you release it, it is copyrighted. Okay. So like, you don't have to like file that away. You can go get that like filed with the Library of Congress. That is an option that you have. but it is not required. Like the law and rights of publishing, you retain the copyright as soon as you release your material through any sort of channel. So as soon as it's up on Amazon, like technically, if you just like put your book up on your blog, you retain the copyright. But if you want like the listing number for the Library of Congress, then you do have to file that. And I'm pretty sure there's like some fee affiliated with that as well.
Gotcha.
But it's not necessary.
Yeah. And then the only other thing I've heard about the Amazon print on demand is that if you don't own your ISBN, then technically they do, and they can pull your book down if they want to, and you can't necessarily go do something separate like, hey, I'm going to release this, special edition through Ingram Sparks or whatever, without purchasing your own ISBN at that point.
Yeah, so like a lot of platforms won't take the ASIN. Some of them do. They don't own your work in any sense. They just control that listing number for the title. But like that's, again, like the bottleneck isn't from Amazon. Like I don't know anybody that has run into the issue that you're explaining. I've heard that complaint or that issue raised, but I've never heard of anybody actually having that problem. As I was saying, the bottleneck really exists on the other side, like where these other platforms don't recognize the ASIN because they are like tied in with the ISBN. So in that way, like they've, the issue for me is not with Amazon, it's with everybody else. They're the ones that are really gatekeeping. I've never heard of Amazon saying like, we're delisting this and like permanently and you have no rights to it. Like it's still your work. I mean, worst case scenario, you could just go buy an ISBN and re-release it. Like, even if it had to be, change the name or something like slightly or whatever, add a subtitle to it and change the cover design or something like, that's not going to stop me in any sense. Like,
right. All right. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you again.
Okay, I think we're about done. I'll throw myself out. In the next month, I need to finish book 2 of Songless, and I need to get that audio. We need to get the audio book done, and hopefully in beta reads. And I am now going to close this space and head out to go meet with Chris to make this plan a reality. Hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. Give me the update on how that goes.
I will. So if you guys, I would love some beta listeners. So I think there might be a few in here. Let me know. So that would be great. And, I'll see you guys next week. I get to go. I'm going home. I'll be at home next Tuesday, but I may still be in this time zone. So it could be, we'll see how well I do. So, wish me luck. All right, you guys, take care. And it's great talking to you guys today. I enjoyed this a lot. I hope you did too.
Thanks, Heidi.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Michael, do you want to, Dan, anyone want to say anything before I close the space?
No, I would say, have a look above. There's some links, and we'll be talking about characters next week.
A great space. Thanks for the space.
Oh, good. Great. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I did too. This was fun talking to you guys. All right. See you next week. Bye.